Hello, good morning. My name is Shemai Lara, and I welcome you to another edition of Sunday Morning Dose. Sunday Morning Dose is a place where we discuss God's Word from Christ's perspective. Only Christ's perspective makes sense to us here, and as such, we'll look at God's Word from that glasses only. So today we'll be looking at how to make changes, how to create changes, how to uh, improve in our lives to better position us to where we're going in life. If 2021, for instance, would be different from 2020, then we have to make some certain changes. We have to be deliberate about making some certain changes. If you would increase in numbers in terms of age and also make progress with as the number increases, then there must be required changes that we have to make. There are certain changes that we could make and propel us to where we want to get to in life. And today we'll look at one of the basic way of helping us to make changes, which is building capacity. So the moment we build capacity, we are already making changes. The moment we start building capacity, we are making changes. The moment a child enters school at a certain age, he started making changes. The moment you get a new job, or you enter as an intern, you start making changes. So we must get to this point where we understand that making changes is probably one of the easiest things to do if the perspective is right. So the perspective we must have towards making changes is not the same perspective some religious people have towards making changes. For some religious persons, when you ask them things that must be changed, when you tell them about things that must be changed, they simply just tell you pray. Of course, praying is good, praying is vital, praying is important, but there are other ways, practical ways, to make changes in one's life beyond praying. And these are biblical ways. In fact, even Christ employ some of these tools in making changes in his life. And we must understand that making changes could be as easy as anything if we use the tool of building capacity. So I am encouraging you this week to begin to think about places where you would want to adjust in your life, in your areas of influence, affluence, where you would want to improve on. It could be personal, it could be work related, um, it could be relational exchanges that you want to make. It could even be at the national level that you want to make. So the best approach, one of the best approach that you could use to create changes in any field that you would desire is to think about how you could build capacity in that same area. So let's start from Daniel verses 9, Daniel chapter 9 verse 2. And Daniel in KJV said, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. So the Daniel is revealing the secret here, and he said, in the first year as I became a king, I also increased in my capacity as a king. I started reading. and I understood the things that God had prophesied by books, by giving myself to capacity building in that area. So we must get to that point where we know that we could make changes by reading, by building capacity, by watching things towards the destination we want to get to in life. So we can't, I can't overemphasize the fact that you could make changes by just building capacity. Very easy, very cheap. So here is what Jesus had to say, and here is what the Bible had to say about Jesus building capacity. In Luke 2:52, as Jesus grew taller, he continued to grow in wisdom. God was pleased with him, and so were the people who knew him. I read that again. Luke 2:52. As Jesus grew taller, he continued to grow in wisdom. God was pleased with him, and so were the people who knew him. So he grew taller, he increased in age. So he grew taller, built capacity in physical form, and as he also was building capacity in the mental form. So today is kind of introductory towards building capacity, but there are two places where we must emphasize that you must begin to build capacity. Two major ways. If your destination must be achieved, if you have a destination in mind and you want that to be achieved, you must think body and you must think mind. You must not just think about the age and neglect the mind. You must not just think about what to wear and neglect the mind. And the same way, you must not just think about the mind and neglect the body. And neglect the body. If the body is not well taken care of, it could weary the mind. The mind could go nuts. The mind could go nuts. And if the mind also is not well taken care of, the body could go nuts too. So the two are required for a full capacity building. For a full capacity building, you must begin to build capacity in these two areas. So Jesus grew taller, then he continued to grow in wisdom. See, when we build capacity, when we make building capacity our job, we won't have to pray for long before God favors us. Remember Solomon? Solomon, the wisest man in the Bible, it had a very interesting story because was given to knowledge. He was so given to knowledge that he had to study some insects. As small as they were, they made sense to Solomon, and Solomon had to. He brought out several wisdom from the lifestyle of those insects, and the lessons are still eternal. So you want to wonder what God did, because God favored him. Why? He had already increased his knowledge in a particular field. That's what I'm saying. Become the best in your field, then you will increase. You will get God's favor. God's favor is not what you look for, it's what is being conferred to you. And how would God confer his favor on you is when you position yourself to be ready, both in body and in mind. Both in body and in mind. Both in body and in mind. And to end the discussion for this morning, like I said, this is an introductory video podcast towards what we'll be discussing for some weeks. So we must build capacity. This is what happened to the disciples of Christ in Acts chapter 4 verse 13. The disciples of Christ were not lettered, meaning they were not schooled. They were not privileged to go to school. But when Christ was done with them, within the space of 3 years, people had to make this statement about them. Acts chapter 14 verse 13. The Jewish leaders understood that Peter and John had no special training or education, but they also saw that they were not afraid to speak. So the leaders were amazed. They also realized that Peter and John had been with Jesus. I take that again. Acts chapter 4 verse 13. The Jewish leaders understood that Peter and John had no special training or education, but they also saw that they were not afraid to speak. So the leaders were amazed. They also realized that Peter and John had been with Jesus. So in the space of 3 years, not just the physical body of the disciples were touched, because we'll discuss as we go further that at some point they could not even recognize and differentiate Christ physically. So they had to pay one of his disciples, Judas, to identify him because they both look alike. And we're going to discuss that as we go on. But the point here is that it was not just that they could not identify them in their look that differentiates Christ and his disciples. At this junction, at this point, they were already with the mind of Christ. They were fully increased. They have been increased in capacity building of the mind. The mind have experienced changes. So they speak boldly and they speak things that were profound, that were truth. And these guys who were analyzing them understood that it only comes from Christ. And as such, they said these guys have been with Christ. So this week I want you to start looking at changes as something easy. Don't fight changes. When people ask you to make changes in a certain areas of life, don't argue it. Don't build self-defense mechanisms. We do that because we don't know what to do. Change is easy to make. Whatever change it is, financial changes, physical changes, psychological changes, emotional changes, whatever change you need to make towards the destination that you desire is easy. Yes, it's easy. I'm here to tell you that it's easy when we employ the tool of capacity building. And this month, or throughout for some weeks now, we'll be discussing that, how to build capacity and how capacity building can help us create the necessary changes that we need to make towards our destination. So till we see some other time, same station next week, remain with Christ and with Christ only. So see you. Thank you.